Good afternoon, good evening, my synthwaving friends. I'm so glad that you're here. Depending on where you are in the world, again, good afternoon, good evening. It's a great day for making synthwave and for learning great stuff. And you're not going to believe this, but today we have an awesome live stream session. There's a lot of cool stuff that I'm going to show you guys, so better get your notepads out and take lots of notes. Of course, you always have the replay. In any case, all right, cool. So today we're going to talk about ways to use rhythm to introduce variation and to develop your synthwave melodies. Now, the techniques that I'm going to show you today, they have been around for hundreds of years, okay? Since the times of the great composers in the 1500s and even earlier. This is part of the formal training that a composer would go through, absorbing all that music theory and composition theory to create music. This is where it all comes from, and I've already digested some of that, and I'm going to try to present it to you in a way that you can use it in your productions starting now. Cool. All right. Before we begin, I just wanted to mention that in September, I'm going to kick off the first ever Synthwave Dojo live group training experience. And it's going to be an 8-week intensive experience where a group of Synthwave producers from around the world, it's geared towards beginners. I'm going to take them through the basics, the ropes of Synthwave, with the goal of being able to create a Synthwave main stack, which is that 8-bar loop that serves the foundation of all kinds of great Synthwave tracks. If you want to know more about that, make sure to check the link in the description because the spots are limited. Cool. So now let's get into the interesting stuff. All right. Here's my DAW, and today we're going to work using this project, and I have just some very simple backing track here, and it sounds like this. The tempo is 105 BPM. The key is A minor, and it's a simple 4-chord, 4-bar progression that goes A minor, F major, G major, then F major again, and back to A minor over and over again. Very simple stuff, very standard stuff. All right. Let me show you what we're going to cover. This document that I'm presenting here on screen is, what is it? It's the Synthwave Dojo Composer's Melody Reference Book. What a mouthful, right? You can get this PDF for free from the synthwavedojo.com website /downloads. I think it's one of the downloads at the bottom. And this ebook includes a lot of stuff that's going to be very helpful when you're writing and creating melodies. So right at the very end, we have this section called Developing Your Melodies. So these are the techniques that we're going to cover today regarding rhythmic development and variation. So we're going to use rhythm, means the length of the notes, where they start, where notes end, and where we place them. First, we're going to take a bit of a theoretical approach, somehow a little bit abstract. Just going to throw stuff at you just to show you what it is, and then I'm going to try to put it together in using an example, a simple melody, to tie it all together and wrap it in a bow so it becomes more understandable. Cool. So the first thing that I'm gonna mention is that if you haven't watched my introduction to melody and how to write a simple synthwave melody live streams from I don't know, 10 days ago or something, I think those are in the description of this video. Go ahead and watch those as well afterward if you're a little lost, because there are some basic concepts that I'm not gonna cover here. But what I'm just gonna mention from all of that theory is that we're gonna focus mainly on a motif, or writing melodies using motifs. A motif is simply think of it as the smallest particle or building block of melody, typically between 2 and 6 notes of between 2 to 4 different lengths, right? So it's not the same kind of note, like 4 quarter notes. It's not necessarily a motif. You have to use at least 2 or 3 different note values and pitches. So we're going to focus again on using motifs, and then through these rhythmic variation techniques, we're going to develop our motifs, change them, make them more interesting with what I'm going to show you today. Cool. So, hey Elysium Almighty Beige, if I pronounce that correctly, thank you very much for being here. Synthwave Jojo members in the house, thank you very much for your support. The first thing we're going to cover today is repetition. Remember, the concept of unity and variety is very important in synthwave music composition and in all works of art. Unity is about cohesion, repeating stuff, giving stuff that the listener, the viewer, the audience is expecting, okay? The tropes, the canon of whatever art form you're working in, the conventions. But if you give too much unity, it becomes boring. That's why we have variety, and we have to constantly balance unity and variety. Variety is about surprise, introducing something new, something they haven't heard or seen or experienced before. It's that constant balance. Now, repetition is a great tool to introduce unity into our melodies. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I already created this very simple motif. And a lot of these examples today are not going to be like, wow, man, this is like the greatest music I've ever heard, like the most catchy melodies, like, wow, incredible. I'm not going to be focused on that today. Again, it's going to be kind of an abstract and theoretical discussion up to a certain point. And we can look into creating great melodies later. But for now, I have this simple motif, which is 3 notes, and for now they're all gonna be in the same pitch since we are focusing on rhythm, and I want us to put on our rhythmic hats for this section of the session. Cool. So we have 3 notes. This is I'm gonna call this my primary motif, and it consists of 2 eighth notes and a quarter note. And by design, I'm using here a piano or keyboard patch from Korg M1. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what I'm using. This is a very famous patch called M1 House Piano. And the reason that I want to use it is that with a piano, you can hear different note lengths very easily. If you use a patch that has long release, long decay, and a lot of sustain, often if you play short notes or fast notes, they are still too long. And again, you can't appreciate some of the detail of the different note lengths, which is what rhythmic work is all about. Cool. So again, I know that this piano doesn't sound synthwavy at all, but that's fine. We'll later find something that sounds more appropriate. Cool. So we have this very simple motif, 3 notes. Cool. Nothing to write home about. But it has a certain rhythm. And appreciate that it's 2 short notes followed by a longer note. So these things matter to our ears. We pick this up. Okay, cool. The first technique that we're going to use is repetition. And according to our super handy dandy reference book, repetition, it says, a motif is restated note for note. So our first tool or technique is simply repeating this motif on the next bar. Very easy. Let's play it back. Cool. And a nice thing about repetition is that if I play this to you in a melody, immediately your ears are going to expect the third time that I play something, it's going to be a repetition, right? So first I played something, I repeated that something or played it back to you again, then you're like, okay, I get the pattern now. Then is it that pattern, the next thing that's going to come up? So we set an expectation. You're expecting that same pattern to be repeated for a third time or to show up for a third time. And I could choose to honor this and use the same pattern or break the pattern and introduce surprise. But in any case, that was unity and variety, applying it to this theory. Okay, cool. This is repetition. I simply repeated note by note the same rhythmic pattern that I used before. I'm gonna play it once more. Cool. Next up, we have augmentation. And augmentation says the theme or the motif is presented in longer note values than were previously used. Use the same proportion in all the notes. For example, a quarter note turns into a half note, I'm doubling the length, and an eighth note turns into a quarter note. When it says use the same proportion, is that you're gonna extend all the notes, let's say by the same percentage or by the same multiplier. Let's put this in action. Here's my motif, and it is two eighth notes followed by a quarter note. Okay, so if I want to do augmentation, I'm going to simply double the lengths of all the notes. Of course, every note is gonna get a different, or is gonna end up being a different kind of note. This is what I mean. This is an eighth note. If I double an eighth note, I get a quarter note. Another eighth note, I'm gonna double it up, and this is now a quarter note. And this quarter note, I'm gonna double it, and I end up with a half note. Okay, so I used the same multiplier in all the notes. I didn't just change the length of one of the notes. I changed them all using the same multiplier, like twice or three times or four times or half, right? Let's take a listen. And again, I'm using this piano patch because it's very easy to hear how on this motif, these three notes, there's a gap between the notes and they have a certain length. And this motif sounds similar. It has unity to the first one. It's almost the same, but there's no gap between the notes. The notes are longer. Not only the first two, but the final one is longer. Let's appreciate this once more. And a cool effect of this is that you could say the first time that I play the motif, it sounds like with more intensity, like more rushed, with more accent, right? Like with more impact, because it's like bum, bum, bum. But this one sounds more relaxed, and I didn't change anything except the note lengths. Let's hear that again. This one sounds like more impactful, with more energy, and this one sounds like more laid back, and we're almost playing the same kind of notes. Okay, so rhythm certainly helps to establish a mood, and we'll look into some of this later. But now, this is augmentation. Like I mentioned, it's as simple as using longer notes than I originally used. What if I were to multiply my notes by 4 times? Then the rhythm that I originally had may no longer be recognizable. For example, I'm going to, if I multiply this by 4, let me see if I can pull it off. Oops. 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. And my original note, 2, 3, 4. Of course, the more I augment the motif, the less recognizable it gets. So typically, you can augment it by multiplying it by 2, 3, 4 more times. It starts to get a little hard to tie back to the original one. Let's take a listen. And obviously, if I have a motif that in this case almost covers 1 bar, and I'm multiplying the length of the notes by 4, it could be that I end up with a motif that's a bar or longer, okay? But that's augmentation. Now, diminution is the opposite of augmentation. We take a theme or a motif, and we're going to reduce the note values or the note lengths under the same or using the same proportion. For example, a half note turns into a quarter note and a quarter note into an eighth note. We're simply chopping all the notes by half or reducing their duration by half or by whatever divider we want to use. So in this case, here's our motif, and I'm going to shorten the notes. So an eighth note turns into a 16th note, this eighth note into a 16th note, and this quarter note into a half note. Let's take a listen. And again, this piano patch or sound is going to help us really pick out the details into how shorter these new notes are. Of course, something else I could do is also shorten the spaces between the notes, like this, and introduce even more rhythmic variation. Okay, very useful. We have one motif. We are using rhythm to create another motif. And like you saw, there's many ways that we can use diminution to our advantage. We can leave the same gaps between the notes, or we can shorten the gaps as well. So this is diminution. And typically, I don't think you can diminute notes or a motif that is based on quarter notes and eighth notes like this more than by half, because then the notes are just too tiny. Like for example here, 30-second notes, they are very hard to hear or pick out. It loses its effect. So as opposed to augmentation, I think diminution, you can divide them once, cut them in half, but more than that, it is not too recognizable, and the notes may be too short. Now, of course, if you start out with something like a whole note and a half note, yeah, you could diminute this like 3 times and end up, I don't know, like with a quarter note and an eighth note maybe. In this case, yeah, you can use this diminution technique twice or 3 times in a row. But it all depends on your starting material. Cool or cool? Let's play it one more time. And even though you may recognize that I'm only using the same pitch and this may sound a little too basic, but hopefully the 2 or 3 techniques that I've shown you so far maybe have had your ears perked up like, oh, that's cool. I had never thought about reducing the lengths of my notes so I don't have to write new music on every bar. And that's part of the importance or the usefulness of this formal theory, is that you don't have to write new music on every bar. You can reuse music that you already created, like from a motif. You can develop it in many ways, so you don't have to write music on every bar, and you introduce unity, a cohesion or cohesiveness into your melodies or whatever you're trying to create. Great stuff. All right. Next up, we have truncation. In truncation, basically, we take any part of the end of a motif and drop it. We chop it off. We truncate it. It's like we have let's say a word or a sentence. Hello, my name is Alonso. That's my original motif. And I will truncate it by just chopping something from the end. Like, hello, my name is... It feels truncated, especially not on its own, but if I say, hey, hello, my name is Alonso, and you hear me, and then when I go to present myself to you, introduce myself to you, and I say, hello, my name is... It's like something's missing because you were expecting me to repeat what I just said. Again, there's unity and variety. I didn't respect unity. I introduced variety. That's part of why this is useful. Okay, so we're just going to chop something off from the end of a phrase or motif. For this one, let's create something quickly. Let's just add a couple of notes here. Let's see. I'm just doing random stuff here. I'm not too worried about the end result. Cool. We have this motif. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 notes. Bam, 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 bam. Cool. It has certain rhythm, syncopation. With truncation, I'm gonna duplicate this, or repeat, or restate, are all ways of saying the same thing, but I'm gonna chop it off somewhere. And the rules, or at least the there's no guideline for how much to chop off, or is it the last note, the last 2 notes or 3 notes, whatever you feel sounds good. As long as the motif feels truncated, then you have created the intended effect. All right, so let's see. I think if we drop, or in this case mute, these last 2 notes, we're gonna feel the truncation. Because here, again, maybe you felt that, hopefully you did. Once we hear a pattern, we try to remember it, and when it shows up again, immediately you ask yourselves, is this the same pattern? And we want it to be this the same pattern, but we truncate it, so we aren't meeting the listener's expectation in this case. We're introducing unity. Let's play it once more. Sorry, we're introducing variety. Cool. And part of the fun is in experimenting how much you can chop off before you can't really recognize it. Let's see if we can, if our ears can pick out the original pattern by chopping off the last 3. I think this one, at least for me, sounds even more, of course, we're truncating more notes, but it has a greater effect because I was expecting this kind of triplet here at the end and it didn't come. Okay, now what if we only left 1 note standing? In this case, I have so little information to go by that I'm not sure that this even is the original motif, right? Could this be a new motif, or is this the original severely truncated? In this case, it feels to me like we lose the truncation effect because right now our brain is confused. It doesn't know, is this something new? It could be, right? So I think in this case, and again, this is the thing you should need to experiment with, is how much to truncate before you don't even recognize the original pattern. Let's go back to just leaving 2 notes standing. Cool. Leaving 2 notes works very well for me. Great. Next up, we have expansion. Expansion, the opposite of truncation. A lot of these techniques are they come in pairs, and it's like they're the opposite of each other, or 2 sides of the same coin. We have augmentation, which is a doubling or making notes longer by the same proportion. Diminution is making the notes, all of them, shorter by the same proportion. Truncation, we chop something off. Expansion, now we're going to tack something onto the end of a motif. We're going to add onto it. We're going to expand it. And part of the idea is not just to expand it with random notes, but it says that any part of a motif or phrase is added to the end of an existing motif or phrase. So to really put this to great use and to really be able to pull off the effect of expansion, it's not any random note that I put at the end of a motif, but maybe try to use a portion that is very recognizable from something that came before. Okay, so let's see how we can make this happen. Let's make this shorter. Oops. Okay, let's use this. This is gonna be our primary motif now. Actually, let me move this note. Okay. Or... okay, let's use this. I need a little room here at the end to add stuff onto. Okay, so this is our primary motif. Cool. Gonna copy, reuse it here, but we're gonna expand it. In this case, our primary motif is made up of two series or two pairs of notes that are very close together. So I could take this motif and put it here. Okay, cool. And immediately we recognize that what we're tacking on to the end of this motif is something that's part of another motif. In this case, I'm only using the same motif, so it could have made more sense if I have, let's say, motif A, and then I have motif B, and at the end of motif A, I add something from motif A. I have motif A, then I have motif B, and I tack onto the end of motif B something from A, right? So then we get, oh yeah, we're reusing here something that we heard before. In this case, again, it's a little theoretical because I'm just using kind of the same motif, but this is the idea. You tack onto the end something that you've already heard before. So these aren't random notes. I'm using the same spacing or the same note lengths that I reused. So let's hear it again in context. Okay, that's expansion. Now we have two more techniques to look at. The first one is displacement. In displacement, what we will do is simply take a motif or a phrase, and we're just going to slide it forward or backward in time by a certain rhythmic division or rhythmic subdivision, whichever one you want, and just by sliding things forward or backward, the rhythm is going to be completely different, and that's what we want to play with, right? That rhythmic displacement is what's going to introduce the variation and development into our melody. So let me get rid of this and create something different. Cool. I think this will work for sure. Okay, so I can just move it forward or backward in time. I'm going to displace it by a certain subdivision to develop and vary the rhythm. In this case, let me just slide it backward in time, like that. Let's take a listen. That's your original one. Okay, it's different. It feels different. What if I moved it forward, kind of like an anticipation? Cool. And part of the nice thing about this is that as you slide things forward or backward, notes that were landing on the downbeats or in between the beats are gonna land in a different place once you displace your motif. So you introduce new rhythms, and if formerly you didn't have any syncopation, now with this you can introduce syncopation. For example, and this is actually a great way, if you tend to write melodies that land on the downbeats, that they can become a little predictable at times or boring because of that. Let me... Okay, let's take a listen. Okay, the first two notes are landing on downbeats. 1, 2. And the third one is syncopated. Let's say that in this case, we're not using any syncopation at all. Everything lands on the downbeat. Okay, cool. It's not bad in and of itself. But if we only use that, it's gonna be super boring. So we're gonna displace this, and it's gonna have a lot of syncopation since now the notes are landing on the offbeats or on the 16th notes. Okay, in this case, it may be a little jarring, so let's make it land on the offbeats, on the 8th notes. Cool. So think of this. You could create a melody, let's say like a normal melody, and then try to randomly displace it forward or backward to see if there's any new movement or any new rhythm there that catches your ear, and then maybe you delete all the rest, but then just keep a couple notes and create a new melody around that. So that's like a great way of introducing, let's say, random chaos into your process and coming up with new ideas. Because most of us, when we write music, after a while, I think we tend to approach things using the same approach, like the same perspective, and we always tend to use then downbeats, or we always introduce syncopation. So this is like a great way, a random way of doing something out of the ordinary, at least for us, and see what we like it. And of course, if I displace an entire melody, maybe I wouldn't like all of it, but I can chop off or get rid of what I don't like, and maybe there's a few notes there that will spark my creativity and take me to a completely different place. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do here. Cool, so that was Displacement. Hello guys, hey Autumn Red, Michael, Tino, VHS Tokyo, and Stuart. Hello guys, great to have you here. Our last technique for today is going to be rhythmic change. So it's not exactly like displacement. And in here, we're changing some, but not all of the rhythmic values of our motif. In displacement, we take the whole thing, the whole motif, and we slide it forward or backward. So all of the rhythm, or the complete rhythm, is displaced and changed. In this case, with rhythmic change, I'm just gonna change some of the note values. Okay, let's see. Let's do something. How about this? Okay. Cool. All right, this is my primary motif, and I want to use rhythmic change. And there's a couple of ways that I can do this. The first one is I could slide some of the notes, 1, 2, or more, not all of them, because that would be displacement. What if I slid these two in the middle? Let's see how we like it. Okay. Cool. The first motif has a lot of rhythmic interest, syncopation, right? Very funky. But then we present it in more of a downbeat focused way. It sounds more heavy, more solid, and it's different, but it comes from the same place. Now, that was cool. We could, of course, or let's move all these 3 notes for now. Cool. Now, this certainly feels like a very different rhythm from the first one, right? Again, this chaos or this random way of displacing things to come up with new ideas is very cool. The other thing that I wanted to mention is another thing you can do. Okay, we have 4 notes in our motif. You could split one of these notes and turn it into 2, or take one of these notes and double it. So for example, this is also a rhythmic change, because I didn't change the rhythm of any of the other 3 notes. I only changed the rhythm of this first note by breaking it in half or splitting it. So now I have 2 notes in the space where I used to have 1. Let's take a listen. Cool. It's very tied to the original one, but it has a slight variation. It doesn't sound exactly the same. This is very nice. And like I said, instead of taking one note and splitting it in half, we could duplicate one note so the rhythm here is changed. Let's take a listen. Once more. Cool. This here sounds more intense than the primary motif. So we used rhythm not only to introduce variation, but we dialed up a notch in terms of the intensity and perceived energy, because it's less relaxed. A great concept to use is fewer notes and longer notes feels more relaxed than more notes with less space. Okay, that tends to feel more intense with more energy, more tension. So fewer notes and longer notes feels relaxed, calm, with a lot of space, and shorter notes with shorter durations between the notes and a lot of notes tends to sound very energetic, dynamic, and tense. So we can use these 2 concepts to our advantage. And now when we get to the final part of this session, I'll see if I can create a some kind of melody that combines few notes with more notes, and using some of these concepts. All right, rhythmic change. And as I mentioned here, rhythm can help convey mood and emotion. Generally speaking, notes of long duration convey calmer moods, and notes of short duration convey more energetic and dynamic moods. And definitely use this to your advantage when writing your melodies. Like if you want something to sound calm, peaceful, use longer notes. You wouldn't start your melody like ba 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 ba. That doesn't sound calm at all, right? That sounds super intense. And really think about these things when you're writing a melody. Not just say, okay, I need to fill up 8 bars of music, and because you will start creating a bunch of notes and a lot of stuff that doesn't go anywhere. But take a step back and say, okay, I have the size of my canvas is 8 bars, but what does the music require here? What does the track require at this spot? Or what is the music telling me? Because maybe on your first or one of the first sections of your track, in this case, the music calls for something more calm, more peaceful, right? With little energy. But another section down the line, you need to write a melody, and you're on the climax of the track. So you need a lot of intensity, a lot of energy. So that other part needs a completely different approach than the first one that you wrote. So you have to think about this. You have to control the energy, control the mood in your music by making all these choices by design, not by chance. Cool. Enough of that. So let's see if we can try to create a melody that sounds decent for this music, and implement some of these concepts in a way that's a little more cohesive and not so choppy and abstract. Let's see. what I'm gonna do first is define the range of my melody. So this is, I don't know what, like A3 or something. Doesn't matter. And then I have this other A note here. So my range is gonna be, let's say from this A, then up to this A and a third. Okay, so from this bottom A to this top C, this is my range of notes. And remember, I covered this in my introduction to melody. The reason for that is if I create a melody that jumps 2 or 3 octaves, it sounds jarring and disjointed. Of course, I could work my way to a higher octave, right? But I can't directly, or if I do it, like play notes here and then jump 2.5 octaves up like here, it sounds weird. The tone of this patch is different, and you'll find this this happens as well with any synth subtractive synth patches and FM patches, whatever, that notes here in the lower registers have a certain body, a certain resonance, and the higher up you get, they tend to sound shrill and brittle. So you gotta be careful how high you go in terms of writing your melody. In any case, from this A to this A and this C, this is where I'm gonna try to come up with something simple, and I'm gonna play with this for a few seconds or minutes and see what I can come up with. And again, let's imagine that this is my track. This is chill, kind of darkish vibe, laid back. It has space, has a groove. I don't want to start my melody doing this. It doesn't make sense, right? A lot of people do that when they're writing their first melodies. Chill, take a chill pill. Let's first start out easy, and we could get to this down the line. Okay. So let's think long notes and chord tones, at least in the beginning. Chord tones on A minor are A, C, and E. Those are not the only tones that you can use, but they will always sound good. And that's going to be a safe starting point. I'm going to do this exactly like that. Thank you very much, latency. Okay, this is exactly how I wanted it. Let me eliminate the overlaps. Yeah, this is cool. Again, this is not a masterpiece, not by chance. This is a great starting point. What I like about this is we have some notes playing on the downbeats. We have a little syncopation here towards the end. This is a chord tone, and another chord tone. Yeah, a little boring, stable, but that's fine. Again, we're just trying to put some of these concepts into action. Later on your own, you can figure out what are the kinds of weird stuff that you like to introduce. But for now, this is going to work just fine. And actually, if I wanted to, I could use maybe D or B as a non-chord tone. Let's see. Not bad. It sounds cool. Definitely hear how chord tones sounds very consonant and stable. And the minute that I changed this note to a non-chord tone, either D or B, it's like there's more tension, more interest. Let's take a listen again. Okay, sounds cool, sounds stable. But let's use B, non-chord tone. All of a sudden it has more flavor. Ooh, it has more interest. Let's try D. Cool. Let's go with B. Okay, so this is my motif. Let's use repetition, okay? Standard thing to do. And now we're applying pitches to a rhythm. The first 3/4 of this session, we were only strictly looking at rhythm. I only played the same pitch A on top of or to construct my motifs. Now I'm applying or using different pitches in my motifs. Cool. Let's repeat this thing, but okay, I could repeat it with the same pitches, or I could adjust the pitches for the chord that I'm playing. Let's just repeat exactly as is, note for note, both in pitch and rhythm. Doesn't sound bad, sounds okay. Because A is a chord tone, B is not a chord tone, and E is not a chord tone, so we have almost, let's say, half and half chord tones, half non-chord tones. But let's adjust this, keep the rhythm, but use chord tones. We could do, there's many ways we could swing this. I could do A, A, C, F. I could do here C, C, A, and F. Or I could do F, F, C, A. Let's try this one. So this one definitely sounds with more unity towards the first one. Well, I'll leave that for later. Let's listen now. Cool. Okay, it sounds very much like the first one with some variation, and it's cool. But now, let's change these pitches. So the shape of this motif is the opposite of the first one. Here, we're going from the bottom to the top, and this one we start at the top and go down to the bottom. Oh, very cool. Very nice. Okay, let's do this. We did this rhythmic repetition. I didn't repeat the pitches note for note. I repeated the rhythm from my primary motif. Cool. Let's see what else we can use here. We have augmentation, diminution, truncation, expansion, displacement, and rhythmic change. Let's try augmentation maybe, or truncation. Because we've heard the same motif played twice, at least rhythmically, probably we're expecting the third melodic element that I hear to have the same rhythm. So let's break it up a little bit. We're gonna do G, and let me change the notes. D, B, and G. And now we could displace, truncate, diminute, or augment. What if we displaced? Say, let's first try displacement. So I'm gonna move this backward by what? An eighth note, I think? Yeah, cool. That's very nice. Very cool that we expected the same rhythm on the third bar, and we gave the listener something new, but it is the same, kind of the same thing that we originally gave them, just displaced, but to our ears it sounds completely different. Again, we haven't written any new music, only adjusted the pitches and here displaced, and this is turning out to be quite a satisfying melody. It has a nice journey inside, surprises, has some unity, and I quite like how this one turned out. Let's hear it again. We expect the same thing. So we broke the expectation there, introduced variety, and for the end, we could introduce, we could do a rhythmic change, like changing some of the note values. We can elongate some of the notes to give that final motif or that final block of melody a feeling of resolution, like we arrived somewhere. And then I'm going to change it so you can see what it feels when, and how to introduce a feeling of continuation. So and I'm going to do it very much the same as the... Okay, let me copy this one. Okay, we're on F. Let me do something different. Let me... I'm going to extend this note, and I'm going to do C. Okay. What I did here is a combination of I extended one note, I truncated it a little bit, and what else did I do? So it was a mix of various techniques. Displacement, or primarily rhythmic change, and I think I augmented a note and truncated. What I wanted to do is create something shorter with less notes, but with a longer note at the end, so we feel like this whole thing wraps up and there's nothing to say afterward, or at least we get a feeling of, okay, we're resolved, we're back home. Let's take a listen at the entire thing from beginning to end. Here at the end, I don't know if you felt it, hopefully you did. It's like, oh, we rest, right? We are ending on the tonic of this chord. We're playing a longer note, and it feels like, oh, okay, we arrived. We're either resting here or the whole thing's resolved, okay? Now I'm going to show you how we can use some of these rhythmic techniques to make the end sound like, oh no, we're not done yet, something else is coming. And let's do that with playing short notes. And of course, this could be a little bit over the top. Let's see. Okay, listen to how the end, all of these shorted notes and notes that had a certain length, and as I am reducing the length and also playing more notes, there's a double whammy there of not only reducing note lengths and playing shorter notes that also gives us a feel of continuation, like we're not done yet, but I'm also playing more notes, and more notes suggest more tension, more intensity, more energy, and feel an experiment, or experience rather, how this suggests that we're gonna go somewhere else, like there's still more to this, like we're not done yet. Take a listen. Cool, right? Now we're playing the same note, but what if... I'm just gonna randomly pick different notes here. Let's see. And also here on this last bar, because I'm playing higher pitches than I had before, paired with the shorter notes or notes that are reducing length and increasing in their number and intensity and pitch, it's like 3 or 4 of these techniques stacked together, which again on the last bar give this a feeling of we're not done yet, this is not resolved, we're going to go somewhere else because of the of all the intensity that we're creating. And again, the way that you end your melodies or your phrases, how you end them is very important. You can have them end with a feeling of resolution, continuation, or temporary repose. And this is something that you need to control and do it by design, not by chance, with these tools. Now, let me see if there was anything else that I wanted to show. I think we covered all of these techniques. I showed you here how with rhythm, by shortening the notes and increasing the rate of the notes that I'm using, we could control the mood and emotion, going from kind of calm and then going to more energetic and dynamic. And appreciate, I think this is a very nice melody. Of course, if this were a real track, I wouldn't use this kind of sound, I would use something else. But all in all, just appreciate that by creating one original motif, we did few changes, mostly rhythmic, and just adjusted the pitches. And we didn't write any new music until we got here towards the end, right? This is like the only place where I say I departed from the original idea. So this was very smooth. And of course, maybe you're not gonna write every melody like this. Maybe you wanna create it for a certain part more on a random matter, or playing in a random manner playing your MIDI controller, whatever. Maybe this sounds a little stiff. Yeah, that's fine. But use the techniques that you like, use them to develop your skills, and of course, ultimately do what's best for your music. But the reason for me to show you this is not so you create melodies exactly like this, because it could be a little mathematical and stiff, but that's fine. It works. But so you have options. So when you're writing your next track, you don't go scratching your head like, okay, what do I do for this melody? I have no idea how to write better melodies. I don't know how to make this write a melody for this section. And if you have a melody during one of the initial sections of your track, and then you have to write another melody, it's like, oh my God, it was so hard to write the first one. How do I write the second one? These are all tools that you have in your tool belt that you can deploy when the need arises. Alrighty. So pretty much this is all that I wanted to share with you guys today. Couple of last minute comments. Definitely experiment with all the techniques that I showed you today. It's a great thing if you can create like a sandbox project, like I suggested yesterday during the how to use creative filters in Synthwave, and set up different chord progressions, a minor chord progression, a major chord progression, a modal chord progression, and just try to use all of these techniques in that kind of context, just experimenting, not necessarily when you're creating a track, because right there you have like different pressure or different vibe, but experiment, let's say offline, right, in a kind of sandbox environment, and create how many melodies do you think you could create to a chord progression like this using these techniques? 5, 10, 20? I actually urge you and challenge you, create 15 different melodies using these techniques for this same chord progression, A minor, F, G, and F. Vary the tempo, I don't know, make the chords shorter instead of 2 bars each, 1 bar each, and try this out and get a feel for which of these techniques and methods you like. Maybe one of them is like, no, I don't like this one too much, but the other one I do, and that's the one that you'll remember next time, etc. And but you have to practice this stuff to develop your skills, right? Like, it's not by osmosis that you will become a super great melody writer from one day to the next. You gotta put in the work. Definitely, you gotta put in the effort. Now, as I said in the beginning, I have this super awesome group experience that I called the Synthwave Gihon Skill Camp, which is gonna last for 8 weeks and kicks off on September 9th. It's a very limited in terms of space, in terms of slots and participants experience, where I'm gonna take you through the basics of Synthwave towards the goal of creating a main stack or that 8-bar loop that serves as a foundation for tracks, but really in a great way. Like you can create chord progressions, I can create drum patterns, bass patterns, melodies like this easily, right? So you can shave off years of your learning curve and shave off a lot of pain and frustration that I went through that I want to save you from. In any case, check the description of this video for additional details. And I hope that you guys found this useful. And as always, let me know if you have any questions or comments, and I'll be more than glad to tackle them. And keep synthwaving, my friends. Thank you very much for your support, and see you next time.